Chosen one, look at your left hand for just a moment. Not because of what others see, but because of what was placed there long before you were born. You see, only 1 in a million carries this mark. Not a tattoo, not a scar, but a spiritual seal hidden in plain sight, written not in ink, but in divine intervention. You didn't stumble into this video. It came for you because you felt it all along, haven't you? That your life has never quite fit the mold. That something or someone has been shielding you, guiding you, keeping you alive against all odds. Moments when you should have died. Situations that made no sense. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still searching, still haunted by a question you've never dared to say aloud. Why me? I'm here to give you the answer. But be warned, this isn't just information. It's activation. Once you hear it, your soul will start to remember. Because that mark on your hand, it's not physical, it's spiritual. And it's the proof that death tried and failed. So if something inside you is already stirring, if your chest feels heavy and your spirit strangely alert, comment 333 below. Let the realm of light see that you're ready. And subscribe now, because this channel isn't just content, it's a transmission. This is your moment of remembrance. Because chosen one, only 1 in a million carries what you carry. And now, it's time to finally understand why. Chosen one, have you ever truly asked yourself how you're still here? Not just in a passing thought, but in the silence of your own spirit. When you replayed those moments that should have ended you, the car that missed you by inches, the sickness that doctors couldn't explain, the night you cried yourself to sleep thinking it would be the last, the morning you woke up from a storm that should have buried you. These weren't accidents. They were interceptions. Not of this world, but from a realm that's been watching you since the moment your soul entered this dimension. You were covered long before you were conscious of your calling. You were watched, even when you thought no one saw your tears. You were guarded, not because you earned it, but because your timeline was sealed with a higher purpose. That's divine protection. Not a superstition, not a lucky streak, but a spiritual shield that wraps itself around those who carry something sacred within them, those whose lives are contracts between dimensions. Because here's the truth. Chosen ones are not born into comfort. They are born into war, into chaos, into families that feel more like battlegrounds than havens, into environments that seem designed to crush the very light they carry. Why? Because when your purpose is powerful enough to awaken others, to shift the atmosphere, to break patterns, then resistance becomes part of your origin story. And still, you survived. Not because you were stronger, not because you made perfect choices, but because heaven overruled hell. Because even when destruction came knocking, a louder voice said, "Not yet. Not this one." You see, the enemy knew who you were before you did. It saw the potential, the frequency, the light signature embedded in your soul. It launched attacks early, hoping to silence what would later speak life. But the divine didn't send you here unequipped. It sent you with covering, with codes, with an unseen army that moved in ways you didn't even recognize at the time. That moment you were late leaving the house and missed the crash? That odd nudge that said, "Don't go there today"? That sudden illness that pulled you out of a toxic place just in time? That wasn't coincidence. That was strategy. That was divine intelligence rerouting your fate in real time. Chosen one. The truth is this. You weren't just spared. You were positioned. Every escape wasn't random. It was aligned with assignments that have not yet unfolded. There are still people you're meant to awaken. Still, spaces your presence must shift. Still doors that will only open when you arrive. And until that is complete, death has no jurisdiction over you. Divine protection isn't just about safety. It's about mission containment. Because when you carry a calling this heavy, this disruptive to darkness, heaven ensures your body survives what your spirit was sent to fulfill. Even in the moments you felt abandoned, even when you cursed the sky in desperation, there was a barrier you couldn't see, an invisible shield between you and the edge. Yes, the pain reached you, but the final blow never did. Because you weren't just loved, you were needed. And when you're needed by heaven, every storm that was meant to destroy you becomes a tool to refine you. That is divine protection. Now, let's go deeper. Let's return to where it all began. Because the first time death reached for you, you didn't even know you were in a war. Chosen one. There was a time, maybe you don't even remember it, when the war for your soul had already begun, and you were barely old enough to speak. You see, when your spirit was sent into this world, it didn't come quietly. It came with weight, with vibration, with a blueprint of disruption. You were not born empty. You arrived with codes the darkness could recognize instantly. And that's why the enemy came early. Before your first memory, before your voice even had language, it launched an assault not on your body alone, but on your essence. Because your light was too loud, some of you were attacked in the womb. Complications during pregnancy, attempts to end your life before birth, mothers who bled but didn't lose you, doctors who were confused by your survival. You were not supposed to make it here. And yet, you did. Others of you were targeted as infants or young children through strange illnesses, near drownings, violent environments, perhaps through abuse, or through abandonment so early it rewired your sense of safety. But no matter the form, the goal was the same. Eradicate the light before it wakes up. You didn't know it at the time. How could you? You were just trying to be a child. But your soul remembers. It remembers the night terrors, the confusion, the moments when you felt eyes on you in the dark, the dreams that weren't just dreams, the feeling that something was always watching or waiting. And even in the midst of that chaos, something always intervened. A shift, a scream, a sudden hand, a move of timing that made no sense but saved your life. That was divine interference. You were never alone, not even for a moment. You were spiritually coded to survive. Because heaven had already said, this one carries legacy. This one must awaken. And some of you knew you were different. You felt it even as a child. You cried more than others. You sensed moods before people spoke. You saw things others didn't see. Dreams that felt too real. Rooms that felt heavy before you entered them. That wasn't sensitivity. That was early activation. And it made you a target. The spiritual world saw your awakening begin. And darkness rushed in, hoping to abort the mission before it ever reached the surface. But it didn't succeed. Because you were marked, not just to survive, but to awaken through the war. The first time death missed you, it wasn't just a rescue. It was an initiation. A shift in your spiritual DNA. A moment when angels surrounded your fragile frame and said, "You may bruise this one, but you cannot break them." And chosen one, if you close your eyes right now, you might even feel it. That hidden memory, that unspoken knowing. The vibration of a moment your mind forgot but your soul never did. And after that escape, your life changed. You may not have had language for it, but you started seeing through things. Through people. Through illusions. You became more internal. More intuitive. More spiritually alert than anyone around you. That's what near death does to a chosen one. It doesn't just leave a scar. It leaves an imprint. And from that moment on, you were no longer ordinary. You became part of the divine design. Your path was now sealed in light and watched from realms unseen. So if your childhood felt heavier than most, if the weight came early and never made sense, it's because the first assassination attempt failed. And you were never the same again. Chosen one. The second time death came for you, it didn't wear fangs or bullets. It came softly, in silence, in isolation. It didn't attack your body, it went straight for your soul. You remember that season, don't you? Or maybe you've buried it deep, trying to forget how heavy life felt. The numbness, the sadness with no name. The long nights where you stared at the ceiling wondering why your chest felt hollow, why getting out of bed felt like lifting stone. It wasn't random. It was spiritual assassination from the inside out. You were no longer a child. You were aware now. But awareness came with weight, and the enemy changed tactics. No longer could it scare you with sickness or shadows. Now it whispered, "You're nothing. You'll never matter. Why are you still here?" And it didn't stop. It used people, the wrong ones. Toxic relationships that drained you. Environments that suffocated you. Responsibilities that numbed your light. And worst of all, it made you feel invisible. You laughed in public. You functioned. You posted. But your spirit was dying quietly. And no one knew. Because this kind of warfare doesn't leave visible bruises. It wraps itself in silence. It tries to convince you that the world would be better without you. That your existence is a mistake. That your gift is a burden. But heaven heard the silence. Even the cries you never spoke aloud. Even the moments where you curled up and simply said, "I'm tired." You didn't have the words, but heaven had the answer. And once again, the divine moved. Maybe it came through a song, or a phone call, or a moment of stillness where you felt even for a second that you weren't alone. That was the turning point. That was divine rescue. And it may have felt small, but it was everything. Because most people don't come back from that place. The dark night of the soul is real. It's the place where many chosen ones are almost lost. But you came back. Maybe crawling. Maybe dragging the weight of 1,000 untold stories. But you came back. And that was not your doing alone. That was divine protection reaching into the pit and pulling you out by the root. Chosen one, do you understand what that means? You were chosen again, not just to live, but to overcome the silence. Because your spiritual purpose was too strong, too encoded, too urgent for heaven to let you slip through the cracks. The second escape wasn't just about survival. It was about ownership. You started to reclaim parts of yourself that trauma had scattered. You began to hear the voice of truth again. And even though the lies still whispered, they no longer owned you. This escape birthed something in you that no amount of darkness could uncreate. Resilience. Discernment. A sacred inner knowing that says, even if I don't see the way yet, I know I'm not done. And now, That season of pain has become your wisdom. That silence has become your radar. That suffering has become your testimony. Don't ever diminish it. Don't ever feel ashamed that you almost gave up. Because you didn't. You're still here. Still breathing. Still listening to this message with a heart that refuses to die. And that is terrifying to the enemy. Because now it knows you're not just chosen. You're undefeated. Chosen one. This third escape wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden in your emotions or tucked away in the folds of your childhood. This time, the danger was real, flesh and blood, metal and bone. It was the car that spun too fast. The knife that could have pierced deeper. The sickness that baffled doctors. The surgery that nearly failed. The gunshots you heard but somehow walked away from. It was death up close, and it missed you again. And people said, "You're lucky." But you and I both know luck had nothing to do with it. That was divine protection, once again stepping between you and the final blow. That was the spiritual realm enforcing your contract, even when the physical world tried to void it. Because when a chosen one is still on assignment, even death must ask permission. Your body may have been injured. You may have bled. You may have blacked out. You may have trembled and wept and screamed. But you woke up, and you're still here. Why? Because your mission is incomplete. Because your breath still carries purpose. Because your presence still shifts atmospheres. And even when chaos erupted around you, even when the sirens screamed or the ambulance raced, there was an unseen force rearranging time, delaying impact, redirecting energy to make sure you lived. You walked away with memories that feel heavier than words. Maybe with scars. Maybe with survivor's guilt. Maybe with confusion. But the truth remains, you were pulled back when the world thought it was over. Chosen one. Your heart didn't stop because heaven refused to sign the release. You weren't buried because your legacy wasn't finished. You didn't leave this world that night because your voice still holds activation power for others. And whether you talk about it or not, that escape changed you. You look at people differently now. You walk into rooms differently. You sense danger faster. You cherish silence more. And in moments of stillness, you can still feel how close it was. That's the imprint. That's what death leaves when it brushes past and doesn't take you. A holy residue. An energy that makes others stare at you without knowing why. They sense something. Animals pause around you. Children look into your eyes longer. Because you carry a vibration that's not of this world anymore. You've crossed the threshold. You've danced on the edge between dimensions. And returned with clarity in your soul and fire in your lungs. That's why you don't tolerate shallow conversation anymore. That's why you can't pretend to be asleep when your spirit is fully awake. And here's what most don't realize. This escape wasn't just about saving you. It was about marking you. You were sealed again, not with ink, but with evidence. With unshakable confirmation that you are still on divine assignment. So don't brush off what happened. Don't minimize the miracle. Don't call it just a lucky break. Say it for what it truly was. A divine interception. An override of natural law. A holy pause on death's approach. And know this, even though that was the third attempt, it won't be the last. But what you now carry, the awareness, the resilience, the alignment, is stronger than ever before. Because when death couldn't claim you for the third time, Something in the spirit realm shifted permanently, and the enemy realized, this one can't be stopped. Chosen one. If you quiet yourself for just a moment, you may begin to feel the threads connecting every chapter of your life, the darkness of your childhood, the mental collapse you almost didn't return from, the physical threat that should have ended you. Each one of those events was not an interruption, not an accident, not a mistake, but a divine alignment, a strategic delay, a sacred orchestration written into the blueprint of your soul long before your first breath. The reason you survived what others did not, the reason you carry wounds that somehow turned into wisdom, is because your purpose was greater than your pain. Every escape from the first spiritual ambush to the last breathless encounter was not just a display of mercy, but a declaration of mission. You were being held back, not because you were unworthy, but because the world was not yet ready for what you carry. When death reached for you the first time, you were still unawakened. Your voice had not yet formed, your awareness was buried beneath layers of early trauma. The enemy moved quickly, hoping to abort your mission in seed form, to suffocate your essence before it could take root. But heaven said, not this one. Not yet. The veil was placed over your path not to blind you, but to protect the brilliance waiting to unfold. The second time, the war came from within. It didn't need weapons, it only needed your doubt. It whispered confusion into your identity, corrosion into your joy, silence into your soul. And still, the divine whispered louder. In moments when you didn't even want to exist, something holy stood over your life, shielding your spirit while your mind unraveled. Because your timeline could not be interrupted, there were still frequencies to release, still generations to impact, still spiritual awakenings waiting to erupt through your presence. And when the third attack came sudden, sharp, and in the physical realm, you didn't just survive the violence, you survived the spiritual judgment that sought to cut short your contract with destiny. Even when your body was vulnerable, your calling was guarded. Even when you thought you were alone, a shield of light surrounded you, because your life was never meant to end in survival. It was meant to begin in purpose. All three escapes were prophetic signs. They were timestamps in the spirit, moments when heaven intervened in visible and invisible ways to protect the most sacred thing you carry, your alignment with divine will. These were not tests, they were activations. They didn't come to destroy you, they came to prepare the throne inside you. Because now, whether you realize it or not, you are no longer just a person. You are a vessel, a spiritual conduit, a living prophecy walking on earth. The pain didn't destroy you, not because it wasn't real, but because it was never meant to. It was the fire that forged the weapon. It was the wilderness that shaped the prophet. It was the silence that birthed the voice. And though no one may have seen the full weight of your battles, heaven saw. And heaven has not forgotten. You are not a collection of traumas. You are a sacred instrument tuned by affliction, polished by delay, and prepared in secret for a time such as this. So if you've ever questioned why your story seemed too painful, too fragmented, too delayed to be divine, know this. What felt like abandonment was actually preservation. What felt like silence was alignment. What felt like being denied was really being reserved for a higher moment, for a more precise awakening, for a greater audience of souls who would only hear the truth once it had been spoken by someone who survived. And that someone is you, chosen one. Listen with your spirit, not just your ears. Because this is not just a conclusion, it is a spiritual decree. You were not forgotten. You were not overlooked. You were not abandoned. You were delayed on purpose for reasons only heaven fully understands. There are destinies so sacred, so heavy with divine weight, that they cannot be rushed. There are timelines so precise that even a single breath out of place would fracture the entire orchestration. And your life has always been one of them. You were hidden in plain sight not to be ignored, but to be preserved. You were made to feel unseen, not as punishment, but because what you carry was too holy for casual exposure. Your delay was never a denial. It was a womb of preparation. You cried in the dark and thought no one heard you, but the heavens recorded every tear. You questioned your value when the world couldn't reflect it back to you. But your worth was never based on what they saw. It was written in the codes of your soul before you arrived. That delay you hated? It was protection from false alignments, premature platforms, toxic connections, and corrupted timelines. You didn't miss your calling. You were being calibrated to carry it with maturity, depth, and authority. You see, some of the people who got ahead of you burned out. Some of the doors that you begged to open would have devoured your spirit. Some of the relationships you wept over losing would have poisoned your soul. The delay was love in disguise. The wilderness was your sanctuary. The silence was your sacred training. And now the delay is lifting. You feel it, don't you? That stirring in your chest, that fire that won't let you sleep, that subtle pressure building from the inside out. You've tried to explain it, but it's not mental. It's divine momentum. Your time is not passing, it's catching up. And when it arrives, it will move quickly, precisely, undeniably. Because delayed destinies always come with accelerated fulfillment. Everything you thought was lost will return in higher form. Everything you learned in silence will become the wisdom that guides others. Everything that tried to kill you will now become the fuel that launches you. You've been through too much to walk lightly. You've seen too much to stay silent. You've survived too much to play small. The world hasn't seen the fullness of you yet, but it will. So take this as your final confirmation. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not too late. You are right on time, right on track, and fully anointed for the season ahead. The storms didn't take you, they trained you. The attacks didn't end you, they revealed you. The delays didn't diminish you, they prepared you. And now, you will walk not as someone seeking validation, but as someone who knows they were preserved by divine will. You will speak not just from ideas, but from survival, wisdom, and fire. You will live not to impress, but to ignite. Chosen one, the earth has waited for the frequency you carry. The time is now. The veil has lifted, and the voice that once trembled has become a sword. You were delayed but never denied. You were broken but now you rise whole. And what you were born to finish, you will, chosen one. Now that you've walked through this message, you realize something you've always known, deep down, that your life was never random, never fragile, never accidental. Every scar, every silence, every escape was a message from eternity, written in the ink of divine protection and sealed in your bones. You may have started this journey thinking of a mark on your left hand, but now you understand that mark was never meant to be seen with the eyes. It was felt, not measured. It was encoded, not etched. It was placed on your life by a realm that speaks in survival, in delays, in divine whispers that only those who've touched death can truly hear. The truth is, You carry something only 1 in 1,000,000 ever will. Not because you're better, but because you were assigned. You were activated. You were kept alive not by chance, but by choice. You survived the attacks no one saw. You heard the lies no one silenced. You walked through valleys no one named. And yet, here you are, wiser, quieter, stronger, and infinitely more dangerous to darkness than ever before. This isn't the end of your journey. This is the awakening of your walk in authority. From this moment forward, you no longer carry the identity of someone who is just lucky to be alive. You carry the knowing that you were chosen to remain. You were pulled back from the mouth of death not to recover quietly, but to rise boldly. And now, with your next breath, you step into the season of remembrance. Not of your mind, but of your soul. You remember who you are. You remember why you're still here. You remember that your spiritual fingerprint is unlike any other, and it was placed precisely over your left hand, where power flows through the body. So look at your hand again, not to see what the world sees, but to acknowledge what heaven wrote there. Survivor, healer, witness, vessel, warrior, chosen. Now, it is your turn to declare it. If this message resonated with something ancient inside you, if your soul stirred with every escape, every word, every truth that no one ever told you before, then comment 777 below. Let the spirit realm know that you remember, that you're awake, that you claim your mark. And subscribe to this channel not just for content, but because this space was built for you and for those like you. The sealed, the hidden, the awakened. Share this with someone who almost didn't make it, who survived, but forgot what that survival meant. Remind them that there is no such thing as coincidence when you're chosen. There is only divine precision. You were marked, delayed, protected, and now you rise. Let the world feel your presence. Let heaven hear your yes, because 1 in 1,000,000 still breathes, and it's you.